All righty. Back in business. This week, we're going to be discussing from the 12 Powers of Man, Chapter 2, called The Development of Faith. Okay, here we go. Faith has an abiding place in man's consciousness. This place of abiding is described in the scriptures as the house of Simon and Andrew. A house is a structure that some person has built for a home. A man's house is his castle. Perhaps generation after generation is born and reared in the same house. The house where a great genius was born is preserved with care, and it is visited year after year by those who are devotees of the one who expressed some great thought, art, or discovery. If the barn cave at Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, were found, it would become the most famous shrine in the world. The importance that we give to the places where great men and women were born is founded on the centralizing power of thought. All structures are thought concentrations. All structures are thought concentrations. Constructive thinking ultimates in the construction of places of abode. Savages do not build houses or cities because they do not think constructively. So this is in the vein of manifestation, how manifestation takes place. Hello, thank you for joining me. Please let me know if you can hear me. All righty. So, yes, he says, savages do not build houses or cities because they do not think constructively. In the time of David, the children of Israel were nomads. The consciousness of indwelling spirit had not been born in their minds and could not, in consequence, be formed in their bodies. That the time was ripe for a more constructive state of mind is set forth in these words of Jehovah in 2 Samuel 7, 5, 6, 5 and 6, which says, "Shalt thou build me a house for me to dwell in? For I have not dwelt in a house since the day that I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt." Man, did we talk about this just on Sunday, Pastor Michael? Even to this day, but have walked in a tent and in a tabernacle. After receiving this message, David, the drawing power of love, began gathering material for Solomon's temple. Jehovah told David that he could not build the temple because he was a man of war. The temple of God is man's body. Your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. But if man has not complied with the law of permanent bodybuilding, he is like the nomadic children of Israel. He goes from body to body and from tabernacle to tabernacle. Synchronicities. God is so good. All right. Except Jehovah build the house, they labor in vain that build it. So there needs to be a connection between yourself and the Most High, a recognition of your relationship between yourself and the Most High. The tents and the tabernacles that the children of Israel built for Jehovah represent the transitory bodies of flesh. The Lord has merely walked in these flimsy temples. He has written, they have not afforded an abiding place for spirit because of their unsubstantial character. Character issues. All right. The underlying weakness of the tent body was its lack of faith in the inhabiting soul. A new consciousness of the indwelling spiritual substance and life was necessary. So, a firm understanding that there's a connection and it's internal needs to be there in order to have this firm house for the Most High. I tell you, when you're dealing in dealing in parables, where there's another word, symbolism. There you go. When you're dealing in symbolism, things hit differently. So understand that a lot of what's written outside of Judeo-Christian and Islamic holy books, or what's intended in those books, is from parables, and they use a lot of symbolism, the understanding of which has not been consistently passed down. But thank you, Pastor Michael. If you look up the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, you can get some clarification on a lot of that. So hang with me and do your own study on the sidelines. Always be in a position of studying, okay? Let me keep going. So the underlying weakness of the tent body was its lack of faith in the inhabiting soul. A new consciousness of the indwelling spiritual substance and life was necessary, and a man was chosen to bring it forth. This man, named Abraham, represents obedience and faith. His original name was Abram, which means exalted father. The name is identified with the highest cosmic principle, the all-pervading, self-existent spiritual substance, which is the primary source of the universe. Abraham was tested again and again to the end that he might be strong in faith. His great test of faith was his willingness to sacrifice his beloved son, Isaac, in the mountain of the Lord. And Abraham called, this is a quote now, and Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of Jehovah it shall be provided. This incident is intended to show the necessity of a man's giving up of that which he considers his dearest possession before he can realize the divine providence. So that puts in mind for me that if you're having faith in something material, if you're having faith in something outside of yourself, that takes away from the strength of your relationship with the Most High, and it reduces the effectiveness of the faith that's necessary to keep that relationship strong. I hope I'm understood. All right. The incident takes place in the mount of the Lord, that is, in a high spiritual understanding. The law of giving and receiving pertains to the realm of ideas. One must give up personal attachments before one can receive the universal. If a parent idealizes a child, loves it so dearly that its pleasure is first in his consciousness, the spiritual development of the parent is impeded. Let me read that again. That was a strong one. If a parent idealizes a child, loves it so dearly that its pleasure is first in his consciousness, the spiritual development of the parent is impeded because they're putting this child ahead of the Most High in their love and focus. Love your child, yes, but much like it said, the man is the head of the household, God is the head of man, so God has to come first before everybody else. Yes, before the love of God. Then, before the love of God, which is the supreme thing, can fill the heart, there must be a sacrifice of human love. If, like Abraham, one is faithful and obedient and willing to give to the Lord his most precious possession, there is always a receiving or providing equivalent. Even if it's not in your idea of a timely manner, there is strength behind the saying that, you know, everything is in divine timing. And let me see. God is always on time. No matter when you get your blessings or when your provisions come in, it's always on time. So keep the faith and keep it going. All right. When Abraham was willing to sacrifice his beloved Isaac, the Lord stayed his hand. His attention was directed to a ram in a thicket nearby, and he was directed to sacrifice the animal upon the altar in place of the child. Here is illustrated an often misunderstood law of sacrifice or renunciation. We do not have to give up our cherished things if they are real, but the error that prevents their full expression must be destroyed. The ram, which represents the resistance and opposition of personality to the complete expression of truth, must be sacrificed. It's putting me in mind of an Eastern expression. Giving up of the ego, giving up of your idea of yourself. You got to give up what you have envisioned as who you are and put yourself fully in the hands of the Most High. That is a strong form of faith. My goodness. And a lot of us aren't consistently ready to do that. But those who, and it's a courageous thing too. I'm going to put the word courage on there. It's a courageous step to put your full faith in the power of the Most High and allow him to do what he does in your life and to be accepting of his design of what your plan might be. If you're focused on a particular thing, you may think it's going to happen in a certain series of steps, but it may come to you in a totally different way. And the way that it comes, it's perfect because you couldn't have planned it yourself. Wow, that's beautiful. All right. Let me keep going. I'm not going to be tearing up over here today. All right. Here's the quote. Give and it shall be given unto you is the statement of a law that operates in every thought and act of man. This law is the foundation of all barter and financial exchange. Men scheme to get something for nothing, but the law, in one of its many forms, overtakes them in the end. Don't think you can consistently shortchange a relationship. If you're demanding your full measure, expect to give your full measure. Because at some point it's going to be off balance and you'll regret getting yourself into that position. Karma would be a way of expressing that. There's several different ways to define karma, and I do believe that, a form of regaining the proper balance, falls into the understanding of what karma encompasses. Alrighty, let's keep going. Even metaphysicians, who above all people should understand the law, often act as if they expected God to provide abundantly for them before they have earned abundance. I'm going to testify to this fact from my personal experience that when I have put my all, my trust, my faith in a situation, you know, when they say give it to God in faith and love. Trust that He has you in His hands, not that He's going to catch you. If you feel like you're falling, He's there. You know, you may feel like you're falling, but you are always in His hands. Okay. So, from my personal experience, when I have wholeheartedly trusted the process, put it in God's hands, it's amazing the results that come from that. Alrighty, let's keep going. I love this line of study. Oh my gosh. Alrighty. It is an error to think that God gives anybody anything that has not been earned. The Holy Spirit comes upon those who pray in the upper room. The upper room corresponds to the Mount of Jehovah. It is the high place in the consciousness where man realizes the presence of divine mind. All right. Imagine, if you're not familiar with this, or even if you are, if you're not familiar with it, look it up. The lineup of the chakras from red to white. The upper room is that white section at the very top, the crown chakra, the highest vibrational level. There's a bunch of different ways that it has been mapped out. Check it out on Pinterest, or if you do a chakra search on Google and look for the images, you should see quite a few examples of how it's been demonstrated in print form. Okay. So the upper room corresponds to the Mount of Jehovah. It is the highest place in consciousness where man realizes the presence of divine mind. The greatest work that one can do is to strive to know God and to keep His law. God pays liberally for this service, and the reward is sure. Like I was saying, the reward is sure. Is built up, missed the word, faith is built up in consciousness under this law. And here's a quote: faith is assurance of the things hoped for. When there has been an aspiration and a reaching out for the spiritual life, the faith faculty becomes active in consciousness. The prayer of supplication is impotent. The prayer of affirmation is immediately effective. So, that is a bit of subtlety right there. The prayer of supplication, where you're asking the Most High for something, has you in a position of mental inferiority, like you're holding yourself below when you're actually in communion between your heart chakra and your third eye chakra. You are in communion with the Most High at all times. So for you to be saying, you know, supplication, another word might be begging. There's probably a better word, but I'm going to use begging because that came to mind right now. You know, you're in a position, you're putting yourself in a position to be begging the Most High for something that, and He's saying that that's a position of impotence. The prayer of affirmation. Affirmation is praying as if it's already here. It is on its way. You're giving thanks in advance. You know, praise and, give God his glory in advance of what you're asking for. That's a more powerful position. And if you study how manifestation works, imagining that you already have it, speaking and moving as if you already have it is what draws it in faster for you. So keep yourself in a powerful position with affirmation in how you say things, how you communicate things between yourself and the Most High. Let's keep going. Intellectual faith admits doubt and hope of fulfillment in the future. Spiritual faith includes unfailing assurance and immediate response. The two attitudes of faith are often observed acting and reacting upon each other. Peter started to walk on the water in spiritual faith, but when he saw the effects of the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. Then the I am, Jesus, gave its hand of spiritual power. The wind ceased, and there was no longer any doubt of faith's ability to rise above the negative consciousness. The first and greatest disciple of Jesus was Peter, who has been universally accepted by the followers of Jesus the Christ as a type of representing faith, as a type representing faith. That's what it says. Before he met Jesus, Peter was called Simon. Simon means hearing, which represents receptivity. We understand from this that listening to truth in a receptive state of mind opens the way for receiving the next degree in the divine order, which is faith. So, being resistant to hearing the truth because it may seem or feel foreign to you, you recognize it as the truth, but it may be contrary to what you were taught. It may be contrary to how it was explained to you previously. But I'm going to say that each of our relationships with the Most High is a personal one. So someone's interpretation of how it's supposed to look, how it's supposed to feel is going to be different. Their way of, somebody else's way of expressing how they communicate, how they're in communion with the Most High, their word usage may be different than your word usage, but it's powerful for them. So use the words, feel the feelings, direct yourself in the way that feels most powerful for you. This is an individual experience. We are all extensions of the Most High, extensions of the I am consciousness. He gives us a certain level of power to pull things in for our benefit, spiritually and materially. Right now, we're talking about things that are spiritual. But just because it doesn't sound like what you were taught, and a lot of us were told to memorize certain things. So we memorized it in a particular way, but in reality, we receive it differently, which is why we're able to recognize truth when we hear it, even if it's not expressed in the way that was taught to us initially. All righty, let me keep going. So, being receptive, truth in a receptive state of mind opens the way for receiving the next degree in divine order, which is faith. Jesus gave Peter his new name and also its meaning, which is, he said, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." Faith in the reality of the invisible builds a real abiding substance in mind and in body. Alrighty. All kinds of ideas grow quickly when planted in this rich substance of the mind. Your mind is stronger than you give it credit for. The first principle of hermetics is the all is mind and the universe is mental. Look up the Kybalion, Kybalion, and get a better understanding of that when you get a chance. It's available as an audiobook on YouTube. It's available as an ebook through Kindle and other sources, and it's a hard copy as well. I've come across it in at least 2 ways. Okay. All kinds of ideas grow quickly when planted in this rich substance of the mind. Jesus also called the substance of faith the earth. And he said to Peter, whatsoever thou shalt bind, whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose or deny on earth shall be loosed in heaven. That brings to mind another of the Hermetic principles, which is as above, so below. As above, so below. And it can be thought of, in its physical context, referred to as earth, versus the spiritual context, which is referred to as heaven. Alrighty. In all his teachings, Jesus emphasized that the ruling forces of both heaven and earth are in man. The ruling forces of both heaven and earth. The kingdom of God is within you, is the quote given here. Another quote, all authority hath been given unto me in heaven and on earth. Is it not written in your law, I said, ye are gods? When we understand the omnipresence of Spirit or God, we quickly see how simple and true this beautiful doctrine of Jesus is. So let me read that again. The kingdom of God is within you. All authority hath been given unto me in heaven and on earth. Is it not written in your law, I said, ye are gods? That is indicating the connection, the strong connection, kind of like an interlacing between yourself and the Most High. There's no separation. And that's the bottom line. There's no separation between us and the Most High, ever. Okay. If we are in our lowest of lows, he is there. When we are in our exaltation, he is there. We are never separated. Alrighty. Let's keep going. There is but one real faith. The avenue of expression determines the character and power of faith. Trust is a cheaper brand of faith, but trust is better than mistrust. As a rule, people who merely trust in the Lord do not understand all the law. If they had understanding, they would affirm the presence and power of God until the very substance of spirit would appear in consciousness. And this is faith established on a rock. So for a person to trust in the Lord, much um, like the word supplication, it's like in the elementary stages. Fake it till you make it is what comes to mind for me. When you trust in the Lord, it's the base level, but you can upgrade that by establishing firm faith. If they had understanding, they would affirm. When you affirm, that's more than being in supplication. I'm moving the words around, trying to enmesh this understanding for you. But I'm going to keep going. You can always rewind this and listen to it 16 times if that's what it takes. And that's okay. Faith. Words should be expressed both silently and audibly. The power of the spoken word is but slightly understood because the law of the word is not rightly observed. People are careless with how they use their words. And just one example is, as we read earlier, the difference between supplicating and affirming. You know, you're making the connection, you're having the communication, but the context of it makes a difference. Words have energy. If you're used to thinking of things on a vibrational scale, each word choice has its own vibration. And so if you can choose a stronger word in your affirmation, it's a higher vibration. Anything less than that is, by extension, weaker. And I keep going. So be mindful of how you use your words and what words you're using at all times. It's been said, words are spells, and much of the Bible is spell casting. You're giving people a way of thinking that they did not have before, or you're enforcing in people a way of thinking, a proper way of thinking, ideally, that they may not have had. They might have needed a reminder, and there it is in word form. So the power of the spoken word is but slightly understood because the law of the word is not rightly observed. The word is the creative idea in divine mind, which may be expressed by a man when he has fulfilled the law of expression. All words are formative, but not all words are creative. Okay. Not all words are creative. And think about that in a manifestational context. Thoughts, words, and deeds. Your imagination, your words, and your actions bring about what you want in your life. Okay? The creative word lays hold of spirit, substance, and power. Let me read that again. The creative word lays hold of spirit, substance, and power. Physical science hints at this inner substance and energy in its description of the almost inconceivable power inherent in the universal ether. We are told that the manifest forces such as heat, light, and electricity are but faint manifestations of an omnipresent element which is thousands of times greater than these weak expressions. When you think of the term be and it is, as in God says to a thing, be, and the strength of his saying be, the strength of his projection of be, like be this thing, makes it become in its physical form or otherwise. Okay? Might not have thought about it like that before, but it was the strength of a word. Okay. Radio is opening up a new field of activity in the use of the spoken word. A newspaper article on the wireless telephone says, do you happen to know that a single word spoken in Lower Broadway, New York, among the skyscrapers, could break every pane of glass in adjacent buildings and create a disturbance that would be felt for a mile in every direction? The human voice transformed into electrical energy for wireless transmission develops 270 horsepower. Let me pause here, because what came to mind for me when I read that radio has opened up a new field of activity in the use of the spoken word, in the early 1900s, a lot of programming was delivered by radio. And the War of the Worlds, it's two different movies now, one that came out in black and white and another one that came out more recently in color with Tom Cruise. But that storyline was originally a radio program. And at that time, people's main way of getting information was in print by newspaper and through radio. So millions of people were at home hearing this program. They may not have caught the first few minutes where they explained, this is a dramatization. You know, these are not factual circumstances. You know, this is a program, a fictional program that's been created. If anybody jumped in on that program, it would have sounded like a news report, you know, telling them of an alien invasion. And many people at the time when that was broadcast were thrown into anxiety. You know, they were thrown into some strong anxiety because they, like I said, they did not hear the announcement at the beginning that it was just a fictional program. So they're joining in, they're listening, they're thinking they're listening to real life reporting on a current event. More recently, with television, after 9/11 happened and they kept replaying the crashing into the towers and the towers falling down, they kept replaying that on the news programming. Children were watching these programs. They were watching the repeat of this event, thinking that it was happening constantly. And children developed anxiety, thinking that they were in a war situation. You know, oh, that's in the United States, that's in New York, you know, and, you know, it's happening now. Somebody did that. People are dying. You know, it created a lot of anxiety in people. So that's to let you know the power of propaganda, whoever it's made by. Even a low form of propaganda, advertising. If you hear a certain jingle, they used to play jingles for different things like laundry detergent, cereal, you know, repeated enough times, you walk into the store and you're singing it to yourself before you even realize it. And you're picking up the product off the shelf. You know, that's a form of programming. It's somebody exerting their power over you psychologically. So the power of the word, the power of programming, repetition, you know, we have examples of it all the time, which is why I say take the time to unplug as often as possible, because most of the stuff that we take in through our eyes and our ears does not have an immediate effect on our quality of life, except to give us stress, to throw us into fear, anxiety, but on our day-to-day, getting our bills paid, breathing, picking up stuff from the store, it does not affect us, on a day-to-day basis as much as we're taking it in. Some people leave the news in constant rotation in their house, and it's not necessary. Let me keep going. This is going to be a long video. Oh my gosh. So just wanted to say that. Wireless transmission develops 270 horsepower. The power often sorry. Words look kind of close together. The power of 10 men is equal to 1 horsepower. The human voice, electrified for wireless purposes, is equivalent to the power of 2,700 men. In the various processes that step up a voice for radio transmission across the Atlantic Ocean, it becomes 135,000 times more powerful when uttered by the person sending the message. Thus, starting with an initial energy of 1/1000th of an electric watt, the voice is boosted by a powerful station until it is intensified 100 million times. Something else that just came to mind for me. When people were concerned about living under power lines, it's because of the constant vibration of the electricity that's being transferred through those lines and how it affects people, animals, plant life that is, existing underneath it. So some people are very uncomfortable about living next to power lines, below power lines, and that is why. Okay, if the spoken word can be mechanically intensified 100 million times, how much greater will be its power when energized by spirit? When Jesus said with a loud voice to Lazarus, come forth, he must have made contact with the creative word referred to in the first chapter of John, because the results showed its life-giving character. When he healed the centurion's servant by his word sent forth on invisible currents, he said that the work was done through faith. So faith must boost the spoken word even more than 100 million times, as evidenced by its marvelous results. The transference of energy is a term that is used when describing an interaction between two people, or at least one person to more people. There's a communication going back and forth. There's energy being given, by the intensity of the words that are being transmitted. Okay? Transference of energy. Oh. The movie Two Can Play That Game with Vivica Fox and Morris Chestnut gave an example of that. They were in the process of a breakup. He's at home by himself, watching TV. She comes by in her spaghetti strap dress to drop off some things he left at her house. By the time they finished communicating at that door, and they did this back and forth to each other. She did it face to face, he did it by phone. Changing the energy of the person internally because of the interaction that's happening, the tone of the voice, the visualization, what's in front of them. They're exchanging understandings based on, tone, the energy of the words, body language may be slightly different from what's coming out of the mouth, but the transference of energy in that interaction changes the energy of, for him, example, he was sitting at home, she came by, he was all, amped up and excited because he saw her, and, she was playing coy and he could see how beautiful she was. And by the time she walked away from that door, he was feeling depleted, and she was all excited because she knew she had changed his energy. And he ended up doing the same thing to her by phone at some later point. So in your interactions with people, pay attention to how your energy changes. Sometimes before they even say their first word, you're looking at this person, they're approaching you. What is your initial reaction to their approach? Are you happy to see them on their way? Does your heart drop? Are you like a deer in headlights with anxiety? Transference of energy. And that's without even a word being exchanged. So, much less having a conversation and arguing out points or going through hashing out differences of opinion, hashing out different understandings. It's happening almost all the time. Okay, let me keep going. This will be long. This book, we're doing one video per week. So when he healed the centurion's servant by his word, sent forth on invisible currents, he said that the work was done through faith. So faith must boost the spoken word even more than 100 million times, as evidenced by its marvelous results. That the word of faith has an inner force, and that this force rushes forth and produces remarkable transformations in the phenomenal world, is the testimony of thousands who have witnessed its results. There is power in the book, okay? Many of these religious texts, there's power in the stories that we glean from these books. They have the effect on our lives. They have the effect on our thought processes that they're meant to have. Okay? Jesus said, "If ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you." He knew about the great spiritual machinery that the word of faith sets into motion. He illustrated how man, spiritually developed, could by faith control the elements, quell storms, walk on water, retard or increase the growth of life and substance in grains, trees, animals, and men. People say when they talk to their plants, they perk up because you're giving positive energy to the plant, and you can see the result of that, over time, versus when they're not being spoken to, they tend to be more droopy. Amazing. All right. The ponderous dynamos that generate electricity to light a city are set going by a touch on a button. There is a button in the mind of man that connects him through faith with almighty energy. When the word of faith is spoken to large tumors and they melt away, it is not the transformation, is not the transformation equal to the removal of mountains? Let me read that one again. When the word of faith is spoken to large tumors and they melt away, people have had spontaneous recoveries from physical ailments. And this is an example of that. And they melt away. Is not the transformation equal to the removal of mountains? When a paralyzed limb or a lifeless organ is quickened and restored to natural functioning, is not that quickening a raising of the dead? It is not necessary that the one who touches the button of faith shall understand all the intricate machinery with which he makes contact. He knows, like one who turns the electric switch, that the light or power will spring forth. The faith center, the pineal gland, opens the mind of man to spiritual faith. Merely affirming the activity of this superpower will quicken it in consciousness. Jesus said, I speak not from myself, but the Father. Faith, abiding in me, doeth his works. The transformers of electricity are paralleled by the transforming power of mind, that if a man sanely believes he can do a thing, he will eventually find a way to do it, is an accepted axiom of psychology. The mind generates an energy that contacts the universal energy and causes circumstances and events to fall into line for the attainment of the latent idea. Okay? We put out the energy for what we want, and maintaining that energy makes it happen over time, however, quickly or however long it takes. Sometimes what we want has more moving parts, so it takes a little bit longer, but sometimes things can come within a day, 2 days, a few hours. Okay. John came crying in the wilderness of mortal thought. Repent ye, that is, change your mind. Paul discerned a like necessity, hence his call, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. When people see the possibilities that follow a right change of mind, they will crowd the halls of metaphysical teachers as they now crowd moving picture shows, when it is clearly understood that doubt, fear, poverty, disease, and death, every thought, good or bad, that men have expressed have existence through mind. We shall see a shifting of consciousness and a radical change in the thought and word by everybody of sane mind. Then we shall ask for the true source and find it, as did Paul, who said, have this mind in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. It was not Jesus, but the mind in Jesus that did the great works. He was the center of faith that transformed the mighty creative forces of being, which are active in the universe through the mind and brain of man, into a form of force usable in his environment. Tap this inner reservoir of faith, and you can do what Jesus did. That was his promise. Its fulfillment is the test of a true follower. And the quote says, by faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death. By faith, Noah prepared an ark to the saving of his house. By faith, Abraham, being tried, offered up Isaac. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months by his parents. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down. And what shall I more say, for the time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, waxed mighty in war, turned to flight armies of aliens. Women received their dead by a resurrection. And with that is the end of the chapter on faith. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Thank you for joining me. I will continue. Next week, we're going to be talking about strength, stability, and steadfastness. Chapter 3 in the 12 Powers of Man. If you haven't visited my other channel, it is Pull Your Power Back on both YouTube and Instagram. I usually post there Mondays and Thursdays, 7:30-ish. And on this channel, Wednesdays, 7:30-ish. Hit the notification bell. Please follow, subscribe, like, and share. And I will talk to you again soon. Be well. Thank you for joining me.